Hello, everyone. This is Adrian, and welcome to another episode of Rolling Stories, the HR podcast brought to you by Rolling Arrays. Now, not too long ago, the mention of the phrase people analytics would have been met with many head scratching and blank stares in the workplace. Fast forward to many years later, and people analytics is central to human resources department. Decision making about people in an organization is now more than ever analytical and database, just like any other management discipline. People analytics have also advanced recently, moving from report of HR system, headcount, vacation, etc., to more advanced capabilities such as managing talent and workforce planning. For high-performing organization, having and utilizing well-functioning people analytics is crucial to winning the war for talent. And to talk with us more about this today is Paul Rubenstein, the Chief People Officer at Visier, the global leader in people analytics and on-demand answers for people-powered business. Paul is responsible for the culture and talent that powers Visier's innovation and growth. He leads an HR organization that emphasizes talent management, organization science, using people analytics, and building an inclusive and diverse winning culture. Hey, Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, as we mentioned earlier on, the discussion today is really very much on people analytics, which obviously in this part of the world, Singapore, where I am right now, it may not be at the sophisticated level that people in North America be accustomed to. And in fact, many HR leaders that I speak with, they're still trying to understand people analytics deeper. Could you perhaps help us to understand a bit on your journey into people analytics? For many HR leaders, knowing people analytics itself is already fearful. For you, you are a CPO in a people analytics company. Tell us more about it.
Look, I am not a data scientist, right? I don't have a degree in accounting or finance. And I think the key to understand data, people analytics is to remember that it's not about finding answers. It's about helping people ask better questions, right? Like what is people analytics even there for? But before I dive into that, maybe Adrian, it's helpful to give people a reference point, right? Maybe a little bit of history, because I think everybody in HR has been through an HR transformation, right? That's a very, it's a classic exercise where HR went from record keeping to more strategic, right? How do we solve the problems of the business? And a lot of that transformation was about putting in the basics of record keeping, technology, maybe goes all the way back to PeopleSoft and your first on-premise. And then the second one was to the cloud with Success Factors or Workday. And then even more shared services or outsourcing, or there's been a lot of HR transformations, all in the pursuit of helping get out of the record keeping business or spend as little time and money on it as possible so that you could deliver talent outcomes, which is connected to business outcomes. So with that in mind, understanding where people analytics fits, it's helpful to look at the CFO's organization, because the CFO's organization is in a really interesting place. It's gone through that transformation. So if you remember back in the day, the person who became CFO was most likely the head of accounting. Yep. The most talented accountant became the CFO. That was like the path. And very much it was about, are the books and records accurate? Do we have, good accounting standards? Are we compliant? Are we managing risk? Can I get, accurate information out? But what changed in the CFO's function was the rise of FP&A, financial planning and analysis. And very much that wasn't about the books and records. That was about pattern recognition. That was a marrying up how business decisions showed up in financial results, and then backwards, how financial results and operational results might, predict or show a path to the strategic outcomes desired. Right? And the CFO themselves went through transformation. You used to have just people who came in accounting. Now you come in from banking, you come in from operations, and the CFO is the number 2 position in the company, right? Rightly so, because the CFO has done something really good. They've been able to unpack the business strategy into tiny bite-sized chunks for everyone and say, hey, everyone, you make a lot of decisions out there. You might make a decision about cost. You might make a decision about pricing. You might prioritize one project over another on the path to growth, but 12 times a year, and definitely every quarter, everyone's going to stop and I'm going to hold up a mirror to it. I'm going to show you the P&L. And 12 times a year, you're going to reflect on all of those decisions. And if the collective sum of those decisions are in the right direction, everyone's a hero. If they're in the wrong direction, a lot of goats. And so, if you want to be a hero or a goat, you look in between each financial reporting period and you say, did I make a set of decisions that were smart, based on data, and aligned with an overall strategy? Very much people analytics is like FP&A. It's different than the compliance reporting and data reporting of an HRIS group or an HR operations group. This is a group of people that is sitting there saying, hey, people data is business data. And let's make sure that it is in the hands of business decision makers in the right way, with the right context, aligned to a North Star. And the smartest heads of HR are sitting and harnessing this and saying, oh, I can now look into business strategy and say, we need more solution-based skills rather than product-based skills if we're transforming our company. Or we need to really think about lots of how we're hiring based on location or level, to hit a cost curve, an overall cost curve. Or diversity. We need to be able to take the opportunity to hire women or whatever underrepresented group you happen to be working on in your organization. The smart head of HR knows is the path to those collective outcomes on talent. Those are the sum of lots of small decisions distributed in hiring managers across the organization. And what the smart head of HR is using is people analytics to do the same thing the CFO does, to help hold up a mirror to all those decisions and say, are we headed in the right path? So in many ways, that's what people analytics is at its most basic unit. Now, there's a lot of other stuff we could talk about, like the difference between analytics that are called vitamins or pain pills. I mean, I can take it in a couple of directions, but does that help? Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, it definitely does. And I really like the reference to how it was like for the finance department and how it evolved into this CFO thing. Because in my previous life, I was a recruiter, and I remember speaking with this accountant, and he was actually at this transformational phase where CFO is more than just the head of accounting, and trying to push himself into that role was just so much uncomfortable for him because he just wants to count numbers. He doesn't want to deal with all this other stuff that you mentioned that the CFO would have to do regularly. And maybe and bringing this back into the HR department, and of course, people analytics have been around for the longest time. Visier started in 2010. How has this evolved since the beginning of time? Are there some common challenges or resistance to why you think companies are doing it so slowly, are seemingly a bit resistant to putting appropriate people analytic tools in place?
I think it comes down to a couple of things. The most common one we hear is, oh, the data's not good enough yet. I'm in this almost 10 years now. There's one lesson I learned. You can't wait for the data to get good. By putting the data out there, the data gets good and stays good. People in glass houses have clean floors. Everything's neat and tidy. When HR stops correcting data that is bad at the origination point behind the scenes, that's when the data stays clean. As soon as you get it out there, you go through once or twice, and it's sort of magical. You can ask any of our customers; they've all been over this hump of fear, but you have to sort of suspend disbelief, because there's a history in HR of showing up with a spreadsheet, and a manager turns around and says to you, "No, I don't think this data's right," and then you got to go back and run the report, and then you come back again. And they ask you another question, you don't know the answer, you go back and forth. And by the time you get it right and they believe the data, then the moment to influence that decision with data has usually passed. Speed to impact is really important when you're doing analyses. And that's why the current generation of analytics technology really addresses this by providing real-time data that drills up and down. It's built not to answer questions, but to help people ask better questions. It is more about appreciative inquiry than a ping pong match of spreadsheets back and forth. It's a very different thing. So the first one is the data. I think the second one is learned helplessness. People only know what they know. If you've grown up in a world of record keeping, and all you know is the record keeping vendors, then that's your world, man. You don't analytics is a totally different headspace. This has been the challenge for a lot of the big transaction vendors, have been either acquiring or losing out to the analytics vendors, because it's almost like two different mindsets when you're building the code. You know, in record keeping, you have to be really good at transaction management. You have to be really good at the user experience of self-service. You have to be really great at managing compliance. Whereas analytics, you're transcending all of those individual records and being good at pattern analysis. And it's two different, like I said, it's two different mindsets. And so that's the second one. I think the third one is the excuse I hear is HR needs to get good at it first. I will tell you a story from 8 years ago. I was talking to a head of HR at a really big financial services firm, and his HR business partners were screaming, "You can't give the Visier data to the managers yet, because we won't be able to answer all the questions they have." And I said, "Well, we should give them some training." And he said, "You know what? We can give all the training we want, but the fastest way they're going to learn is if they have to rise to the level of competence as the person they are serving."
Thank you so much with that. And for people who will be keen to learn more about yourself and what you do, I understand that you'll be in Singapore doing some sharing session. Could you share more details on that?
I'm really excited to come to HR Tech in Singapore, and I have there's 2 speaking sessions. One is specifically for heads of HR and people who want to be heads of HR, and that's all about using data like a CFO. And that is a lot about, how, I guess, we're going to dive into the fact that people talk a lot about technology, but really, how do you use data to drive business and talent outcomes? And I'm going to cover really a vision for HR, but as well as practical stories, practical applications of how to impact diversity, turnover, etc. But there's a second one also. And so the first one's on May 10th at 2 p.m. The second one is on May 10th at 1 p.m. I'm doing them backwards. And that's about how people analytics changes HR forever. So no matter what your job in HR, this is really about how people analytics is impacting everything from the shop floor to the boardroom, and how the demand for business-centered people data is really pushing the limits of HR's ability to deliver and what that can look like in the future.
Awesome. For listeners who may be keen to learn more from Paul, please do remember these 2 events and check out those dates and try to get yourself in there. And with that, thank you, Paul, for coming onto the show today to share with us more about people analytics. And we really look forward to seeing you in Singapore.
Awesome. I can't wait to meet you in person, and I expect to be fed well.
You will.